Alison is Senior Product Marketing Manager of Domain Management at MarkMonitor. With over 11 years of experience in the domain name industry, Alison has worked closely with several Fortune 1000 companies and has managed a team of client services managers that provide support to MarkMonitor customers. Alison has managed all aspects of corporate domain management, including domain registration and maintenance, new ccTLD strategy consultations, and continues to work with many of MarkMonitor's Fortune 100 companies to provide industry insight and domain protection strategies. Janelle is Manager, Global Relationships for MarkMonitor Domain Operations. With 10 years of experience in the domain industry, Janelle has worked with a large number of registries on behalf of MarkMonitor to become an accredited registrar. Janelle manages the Domain Global Relationship team that is responsible for MarkMonitor's gTLD and ccTLD registrar accreditation. Janelle has worked with multiple ccTLD registries to implement account and domain security features, including Registry Lock. She is a voting member of the Registrar Stakeholder Group at ICANN. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Alison to get us started.
Thank you, Gina. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, as Gina said earlier, if you do have questions, please use the Q&A box, and we will leave some time at the end of our call to answer your questions. So new gTLDs have dominated the domain headlines over the past several years, but ccTLDs, or country code top-level domains, play a critical role in a global strategy. We often get questions about what and where to register, as well as who controls and regulates the different registries. So today we wanted to take a closer look at ccTLD registries, get a better understanding for global expansion. So we'll talk about what the current landscape looks like. We'll take a look at the ccTLD ecosystem, current trends, and then we'll go over some ccTLD portfolio strategies. So let's go ahead and take a look at the current landscape. More and more people around the world are online. At the end of 1995, 0.04% of the world population was using the internet. And at the end of 2015, that number jumped to 46.4% of the world population using the internet. 266 million users were added in the past year alone, and there are close to 3.4 billion internet users today, and ICANN is expecting that number to surpass 5 billion in the year 2020. The top 3 countries with the highest number of internet users are China, India, and the US. The Chinese e-commerce market grew by 41% last year and is now the biggest e-commerce market in the world. As far as what languages are being used on the internet, while English is still the most commonly used language, we are seeing growth rates in Arabic, Russian, and Chinese. As far as what the domain market looks like, 2015 closed with a total of 314 million domain registrations across all top-level domains. That's an increase of 25.9 million domains, or a 9% year-over-year increase. ccTLDs played a significant part in this growth, with they total 144 million, which is a 7.7% increase over last year. The 10 largest ccTLDs worldwide, including China, Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands, account for 67.2% of all ccTLD registrations. And you'll notice on here I don't have TK listed as one of the top ones. This is a true representation of the registration numbers. Since TK is one of those mostly free TLDs, sometimes those numbers can be a little skewed. So Janelle, do you want to walk us through the current ecosystem?
Yes, thanks, Alison. So the ccTLD ecosystem is drastically different than the gTLD ecosystem. And what we want to focus on today is, one, who's regulating ccTLDs and how is that different from gTLDs? And then second, we'll talk about who's actually running the ccTLD registries. So to start, when we talk about who regulates ccTLDs, the big thing to understand is they are not regulated by ICANN. So they do not follow ICANN standard policies, procedures, unless they choose to. So we do have some ccTLDs that choose to adopt some ICANN policies, but it's important to note that they are not required to do so. Their local government does have authority to implement policies or procedures and laws that do regulate the local ccTLD, and the local registry operator can also implement rules and procedures to regulate their own ccTLD. And an example of where we see this come into practice is Argentina, or .AR. In 2013, the Argentinian government wanted to reduce the number of cyber activity in the .AR namespace, and they passed legislation that required all registrants of .AR domain names to go through a validation process. This validation process primarily was focused on local companies and organizations and did not clearly include rules that would allow foreign registrants to be validated. If any of you had a .AR domain name at this time, you understand that there was a significant amount of uncertainty on how .AR domains could be validated for foreign registrants, and it took almost close to 2 years for the Argentinian government to realize that they needed to modify their local laws in order to accommodate foreign registrants and the validation process that would need to happen in order to accommodate them. The local government also decided at this time to start charging for .AR domain names. Previously, .AR domains were free, which led to a large number of, again, domains being registered for cybercrime and other malicious activities. And the government recognized that in order to reduce the number of domains being used for these purposes, they needed to start charging for domains on the .AR namespace. So next we'll talk about who is actually running the ccTLD registries. So ccTLD registries are run by one of 3 types of organizations. The most common is a non-for-profit organization. This includes ccTLDs like .UK or the United Kingdom, Germany or .DE, France or .FR, are all run by non-for-profit organizations. These organizations generally have a full-time staff, including tech support. They generally can offer after-hour support, and they also generally operate under what we call the registry registrar model, meaning registrars are directly accredited with the registry, and they tend to follow fairly standard rules and processes. The other 2 types of organizations that can run a ccTLD are a university or a government agency. And these 2 operate in a fairly similar way. With a local university, this includes ccTLDs such as Guatemala or .GT. It also includes Malawi or .MW. And with registries that are being run by a university, they generally are operated by 1 or possibly 2 individuals. So if you can imagine an entire ccTLD namespace being run by 1 or 2 people can be a bit of a challenge. And they are generally operating rules and regulations that make sense to their local infrastructure and not necessarily what makes sense to the larger internet community. So this is where we see very country-specific type of rules and processes. This is also where we see things like original documents required for registrations or transfers, as well as other types of manual processes. And again, registries run by local governments are very similar. So again, it's a registry that's run by 1, maybe 2 individuals. In most cases, in this type of situation, the individual has other responsibilities within their government organization, and running their ccTLD is a secondary function. So an example of a ccTLD run by a government is .VN or Vietnam, and also Jordan or .JO. What we're seeing with ccTLD registries is quite a few of the ccTLDs in both Africa and Latin America are run by either a university or a government agency, whereas the non-for-profit organizations are most common in both Asia and Europe. So next we'll talk about current trends in the ccTLD namespace and everything that's been coming up over the last 2 years. As Alison mentioned, our focus over the last 2 years has been new GTLDs, but there has been a significant amount of changes in this ccTLD namespace, and that's what we'll review at the end of the next slides. So an overview of some of the recent changes in the ccTLD namespace are registries going from being restricted, so generally requiring some type of either local presence requirement or other requirement. These registries are starting to go unrestricted. We have more and more ccTLDs implementing what's called an EPP system, which is a technical system that allows registrars to automate directly with the registry. When we automate this, generally changes their processes significantly and allows immediate registrations as well as transfers with auth codes and quick ownership changes or domain updates. There's also the availability of 1 to 2 character domains, which we'll talk about more in a few moments, as well as the availability of .IDNs, the launching of a new extension within an existing TLD, and then again the implementation of Registry Lock, which we will talk about in the coming slides. So when we talk about changes in ccTLD restrictions, I previously mentioned Argentina going through some changes on how domains are validated, but we also have changes with Austria, which is an extremely popular ccTLD, is no longer requiring email approval for transfers and instead is going to what we consider the industry standard of using auth codes to transfer domain names. Chile, or .cl, is currently going through a change which is moving to a registrar models, which is allowing us to become accredited directly with the .cl registry, and they are also implementing EPP, which will allow us to automate .cl domain names and allow registrations to be completed immediately, as well as domain updates and contact updates. But let's also talk about Finland. So .fi is going to be changing their rules in September of 2016, and let's talk about what that will actually mean to a company and their portfolio. So Finland, or .fi, is 12 of the top 25 domain names within that space are .fi domain names. So in Finland, 12 of their top 25 domain names are being used rather than, say, a .com or .net, which is extremely high for a country to be using their ccTLD at that level. Finland is also a country where 93.5% of their population is online, which is extremely high for any country. The average in Europe is 77% of the population is online. So this is a registry that currently only allows companies in Finland to register a .fi domain name, and in September of 2016, they will allow foreign registrants to start registering .fi domain names. And this is a great time to reevaluate what domains you currently have registered in Finland and how you should change your strategy in the .fi namespace. And Alison will go into more detail about how to reevaluate your strategy in the coming slides. So next we'll talk about the new 1 and 2 character ccTLDs that are being launched. So this is a ccTLD such as .asia is now allowing the registration of 1 or 2 character domain names. And again, you'll see the list of France, Indonesia, Ireland, Portugal, and Sweden are also launching these. All of these countries are very popular ccTLDs with a high rate of internet use. So a 1 or 2 character domain is going to be in high demand. And it's also a great opportunity to register a short domain name that could be used, one, in social media and or as a URL shortener. So next, we'll talk about the new extension within an existing TLD. So this can be a challenging thing to explain or to see. So in the industry, there are quite a few ccTLDs that currently offer a third-level extension. And what this is, for example, what .uk historically has offered .co.uk or .org.uk as their commercial standard, but they recently started allowing registrations under the .uk namespace. So this allows brand holders to have a shorter domain name within the TLD, and it's happening, again, in multiple high traffic or high volume ccTLDs. And on this list, you'll see things like Indonesia, Nicaragua, New Zealand, Thailand, and the United Kingdom are all launching this new second level extension within their existing ccTLD. And again, this is a great time to reevaluate what your strategy is within the ccTLD. A couple of things to consider is, in most cases, the local market is used to using the third market extension. So getting the local consumers to transition to the second level can be a challenge, and you should consider registering your domain name under both extensions. So under both the .uk, for example, namespace, and the .co.uk namespace. This will also help prevent domain or brand confusion within the local market. As you can imagine, it would be extremely difficult for consumers to understand if one company owned the second level and another company owned the third level extension. So next, I'll turn it back over to Alison, who will talk about the changes with IDNs in the namespace.
All right, thanks, Janelle. So international domain names, or IDN as they're known, they allow users to access domain names in their local language. Before IDNs were rolled out on the larger scale, you might have seen the non-Latin characters only at the second level, third, or even the fourth level of a URL, which is to the left of the dot. But in order for an IDN to be truly user-friendly, the URL needs to support the script across all levels. So here in the example, it used to be, it would be a non-Latin character to the left, maybe ChineseCharacters.com or ArabicCharacters.com, whatever the case may be. Now it should be Arabic.Arabic or Chinese.Chinese. The reason is personalization is becoming an increasingly important component of the online user experience for internet users, and a localized strategy that includes IDNs allows you to give your customers that personalized shopping experience. Currently, there are 30 IDN ccTLDs that have been delegated, but only less than 1% of corporate portfolios are comprised of IDNs. So here's an example of some of the ccTLD IDNs that have launched. And with India, there are 14 new extensions that have launched in the IDNs in multiple languages. So it's not just in Hindu or Arabic, it's a wide range of those local languages.
And the last thing we want to talk about when it comes to changes within the ccTLD namespace is the implementation of Registry Lock. So over the last 3 years, we've seen over 30 ccTLD registries implement Registry Lock. So if you look back 3 years ago, the only places you could lock a domain name were under the .com or .net namespace. And now we have multiple ccTLDs where we can lock high-profile domain names. This is the highest level of security that can be added on any domain name, and currently 53% of the most highly trafficked websites are utilizing Registry Lock. And this is a preemptive measure that can help reduce vulnerabilities. To explain what Registry Lock does at the ccTLD level is it does remove a high-profile domain name from the online system. So this would prevent anyone from logging into either a registry or registrant account and updating the domain name. And it requires a manual process to be followed between the registrar and the registry to update a domain name. So next, Alison will go through some ccTLD portfolio strategies.
All right. So why should you include ccTLDs in your domain strategies? Well, first is to protect your key brands and trademarks worldwide. It's important to create the web presence in those countries that dominate, especially if you have a local office there or you conduct business in a local language, considering those IDNs. When you're developing your strategy and identifying those TLDs to register, anticipate your future marketing needs. If there is a particular country that has shown significant growth, perhaps you should defensively register for now in that particular ccTLD and then use it for future marketing needs. It also allows you to generate e-commerce revenue worldwide, and then also supporting your world sales and marketing efforts. It also, when you do use IDNs or if you do register in a ccTLD, you portray that understanding of a culture or the nationalistic pride. So there are a couple different strategies. You have your brand promotion strategy or your brand protection strategy. If your main goal is to promote your brand worldwide, you have that brand promotion strategy. And you should look at the top 10, 25, or 50 e-commerce countries. You should look at those TLDs that, again, support your worldwide sales and marketing efforts, and again, where your company conducts business or expects to conduct business. You should look at those geographic locations where you have offices, and you should look at protecting your famous house brand in all available ccTLDs where your budget allows. And if you need help with any of that, MarkMonitor is always happy to help our clients identify those top 10, 25, 50 countries where you should be registering, and also working with you to get the most coverage that your budget allows. If your main goal is not to promote, but simply to protect your brand, you want to look at those low-cost, unrestricted ccTLDs. And those geographic locations where you have offices or do business. You also want to look at those TLDs where you have registered in the past. And again, it's important for that brand protection strategy to include those famous house marks and brands across all the ccTLDs. So before we open it up to questions, and actually I think, let me actually have one more slide, sorry about that. Let's talk about those IDNs. If you're still not sure if you should include IDNs in your global strategy, which I know we do have quite a few customers, obviously less than 1% of the portfolio is IDNs, and they're unsure whether or not to register IDNs, reach out to your local office to get insight on how your brands are being used today. Are they being translated into native language? And if they are, work with those local offices to ensure that the brands are being translated correctly and registered based on how and where they're being used and marketed. And then you review your trademark portfolios and register them where available in those second levels. So yeah, we'll go through this pretty quickly, but like we said earlier, more and more people around the world, they're online. The domain landscape is continuing to grow, and it's not all due to the new GTLDs. ccTLD registrations continue to grow, and global companies need to have a global strategy in place. So before you look to expand globally, it's important to understand the landscape and the trends. And we know it's nearly impossible to keep up with all the industry changes and nuances. So let MarkMonitor help you. We'll continue to provide education around ccTLDs and some best practices to help you protect and promote your brand globally. Yeah. Okay, well, with that, I think we can open it up to questions.
All right, so the first question we have is from Erin. So the question is there any indication from Finland that they will make registrar changes simpler as well? Right now, they mail info to the registrant. So that is correct. So Finland does currently rely on sending a lot of information through old-fashioned snail mail. So they currently mail auth codes as well as registrant account information through the mail. It is very time-consuming and cumbersome, and I can imagine it's fairly expensive for the registry as well. So from our understanding, in September, the registry will be moving to an EPP system as well as a full registry registrar system. And what this will mean is registrant transfers should be mostly automated, meaning you'll be able to update those immediately through our system, and it will make transfers easy as well, meaning transfers will be done through an auth code that the losing registrar will be able to provide the registrant. So we should see a drastic reduction in the number of mail that you are receiving from the .fi registry. So that is a great question.
Yes. Okay, we have another one. Are registries run by governments or universities less stable?
Yeah, I think that is an excellent question. It's one that I've heard before. I think when companies are looking at who's running the registry, the idea of it not being run by a full-time non-for-profit organization, they are concerned about the stability. And I would say that just because a registry is being run by a university or a government does not make them less secure. We are seeing more and more of these registries run by universities and governments moving to an EPP system. What that means for the registry is, one, there is a significant improvement in the security of their system, and it allows the registrar to really do most of the work as far as registering, transferring, and updating domain names. So it actually reduces the amount of work needed on the registry side, and it makes things a lot simpler. But again, it's a drastic increase of security because implementing an EPP system will allow a registry to implement additional security measures such as IP restrictions on accounts, two-factor authentication on an account, and other security measures. So I wouldn't say that they are less secure. I would always look at things on a case-by-case basis. And if you do have specific questions on a specific ccTLD, your MarkMonitor CSM can always answer those questions.
Okay. So another question is, how much variation in registration practices among the various countries offering ccTLDs? Two-part question, and do they require submission of registration forms in local languages, or do they all accept English?
Yes, another excellent question. So most ccTLD registries accept information in English. Anyone using an EPP system is doing everything in English because those commands are all sent in ASCII characters. There's a very, very small number of registries, ccTLD registries, that are requiring information in their local languages.
Let's see. So what do you recommend companies register when both a second level and a third level are available?
Yeah, I think, so when going back with, say, in the example of the United Kingdom, where they're currently offering .uk and .co.uk, I would look at the individual TLD, and I would say, look at what you're really looking to do. I would say from a brand protection standpoint, you should register your brand in both the second and the third level commercial standards. However, what you want to look at from there is which one do you want to actively use. If you're looking for a domain to be used in social media or the URL shortener, the shorter the domain name, the better. So that's when you would want to use a second level domain name.
Okay.
And I would also consider what has existed the longest, because again, internet users in country are used to one extension over another, and that's where either your local office, if you have one in country, can answer those questions, or again, MarkMonitor can tell you when an extension has launched, so we can tell you which one has existed longer. So we're also seeing a question on, do any ccTLDs require a presence in their country? Yes, there are still quite a few ccTLDs that require local presence in their country, or in quite a few cases within the European Union, they require local presence within the European Union. I can tell you most countries that require local presence in country, MarkMonitor can offer this as a service. if you do not have a local office. There are still a fair amount of ccTLDs that require local presence. This includes Brazil or .br. As I mentioned, quite a few of the ccTLs in the European Union, such as Italy or .it, France and .fr, Norway .no, are some examples of registries that require local presence. But again, MarkMonitor can provide that if you do not have local presence in country.
All right, another question. Can you explain what the recent change is for domains hosted in China?
Yeah, sure. So that is a big question. So to start to explain that is to go back to who can regulate domain names in China. So in the situation with China, they do have a government agency called MIIT, or it's the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. And this is the local government agency that creates laws and regulations around domain names in China. Their rules can affect registries, so they affect the .cn namespace, as well as the ccTLDs. They're currently being launched out of China, which they currently have, I believe it's 12 .IDNs that will be coming out of China. They can impact registrants in China, and they can impact registrars in China. The recent change we saw at the beginning of April, end of March, was a proposal. So it is not an actual change. It was just a proposal that domain names that were hosted within China be managed through a local registrar. When this announcement first came out, there was multiple news media sources that misconstrued this a little bit and were thinking that anything that had traffic in China was actually required to go through a local registrar, and that is not the case. They are only considering requiring domain names that are actually hosted within China to go through a local registrar. Again, this is still an open proposal. From our understanding, there is going to be hearing or open discussions about this process, but there have been multiple proposals at the MIT level that have not happened. So we will keep you updated if anything starts to indicate that this rule will come into effect. And we can say if it does come into effect, we will just partner with a local registrar to continue to manage any domains that our clients are currently hosting within China. But again, I think that the biggest thing that people are misunderstanding here is this is only domains that are hosted within China. This does not impact a domain that is accessible within China. So if you're using a .com domain name where people in China are able to access it, but you are hosting it outside of the country, this will not impact you. This is only domain names that are being hosted physically in China. Excellent question. We're getting that from a lot of customers, so please keep those questions coming and we can give you as much information as we have. But again, it is a proposal, so there's nothing definite yet, or there's no idea of when this will come into place, if it does. So the next question we have are UDRP or similar domain dispute systems available for ccTLDs, for example, when they offer a second level versus, I'm assuming, through a third level. So to answer that, so in most cases when a TLD is offering a new extension within existing TLD, so in the case of, say, .co.uk existed and now they're offering .uk, generally these registries are offering a sunrise period that gives first rights to the owner of the existing domain name. So if you currently own a domain .co.uk, you had first rights to register a .uk domain name. This is very different than, say, a gTLD that gives trademark holders first rights. But it does protect people that have registered a domain in this existing domain space to prevent any type of brand confusion or things like that. So it is definitely something to evaluate when a new TLD or extension is being launched, is to take that opportunity to get first rights to your brand during that time. I can tell you the UDRP or similar domain dispute systems, if it exists for one extension within a TLD, it exists for all. And again, those are all decided based on the country and not necessarily by an extension level. It's done at the country level.
Thank you. All right, well, I don't see any more questions coming in. So
there's a question about back on Finland will MarkMonitor clients using FI local presence automatically be changed over to non-LP in September? So what will happen is as we get closer to September, we'll start sending out more information about this change. And once we have the specifics of what will be required and the exact dates of when this will happen, we will give clients the opportunity and notification to change the registrant information should they choose to. So if your .fi domain names are currently being owned by your local, say, subsidiary in Finland, you could change it to your corporate standard information starting in September. But we will definitely keep you updated on when exactly that switchover will happen and when you'll have the opportunity to start updating the registrants for your .fi domain names. It's a good question.
Great question.
We're very excited about these changes in Finland. It's one of the most popular ccTLDs in Europe, and it is a very significant change.
Okay. Well, it looks like that was all the questions that we have today. We'll go through. Oh. So we have actually a question. Is there a list of ccTLDs supporting EPP versus manual registration processes?
That is
a very good question.
That is a good question. So I can tell you anything that MarkMonitor currently has automated is generally going through an EPP system, so that would be our first list. I can tell you that so many ccTLDs are coming out with an EPP system that we are just still trying to catch up with them. But if you ask your specific client services manager, they can tell you which ccTLDs offer an EPP system versus a fully manual system.
Yep, and you could also, within the MarkMonitor portal, we do have a research tab where we have all the requirements for every extension where you can go in there and see if it is automated.
Great, thanks, Alison and Janelle. That's actually all the time we have for questions. For any questions they didn't have time to answer today, we will follow up with you after the presentation. Thanks for all the great questions. That was really excellent and shared a lot of extra information for our audience. So, as a reminder, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar's presentation slides and a recording within the next couple of days. So you can be on the lookout for that email. That concludes our webinar for today. Have a great day. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone.